Welcome to the live Unscripted podcast with Rosabel, the place where genuine conversations meet inspiring stories, personal growth, and a dash of humor. I'm Rosabel, your host, inviting you to embrace life's unpredictable journey. Celebrate your unique story and find joy in everyday moments. Get comfortable, stay curious, and let's explore together. Unscripted, unapologetic, and unstoppable. I have a question for you. What if humanity's biggest leap isn't about new technology, but actually about leading wisely through the unknown? So, today, we are diving into a story that it's all about leadership, courage, and what happens when humanity faces the ultimate unknown, first contact. Our guest is Christopher Loric. He's a former Navy officer and now the author of the fiction novel SESG Explorer. This book isn't your typical space opera. It's about leadership, tough decisions, and the real grit that takes to navigate uncharted territory, both in space and in real life. So stick around. You're going to love where these conversations will take us. Christopher, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So first I have to say SESG Explorer sounds like the kind of story that we need right now. What was that spark that made you say, okay, I need to tell this story?
Multiple aspects. One is so many information and stories about real life encounters between people and extraterrestrials, and then about how the United States government works between State Department, military, science, and technology. And I just wanted to bring that together and have just a story about how that would go hand in hand in meeting on our terms extraterrestrial life.
So your background in the Navy obviously brings a deep realism to your writing. Was there a specific moment or experience perhaps during your service that you find yourself drawing from while writing this novel?
Well, I drew from when I first drafted the book. I was actually in Iraq in 2006, and all my experience was Navy and Marine Corps. I had been joint, and joint is where you have two or more services working together, like the Navy and the Army, or the Navy and the Air Force, or Army and Air Force. And don't forget about the Marines.
No, you can't forget about them.
My ARGMU experience, Amphibious Readiness Group and Marine Expeditionary Unit, what I saw between the Marines and the Navy and how they interacted, that was one. And then at 7th Fleet, I had worked with the Army, the Air Force, the Navy SEALs, as well as the Marines. And I saw all the benefits and pluses of that. And when I retired, I didn't get to finish the book due to my military commitments. But when I retired, by then Space Force had been created. I'm like, I need to update the book. Plus, I had done more work with the Air Force and the Army and at combatant commands and saw all these different transitions of experience and leaders and all that. So the rewriting, when I had to include Space Force to put the book in the future, I needed to include what has already occurred. I drew off of all those experiences and people that I had worked with through the years.
Now, did you find that challenging because of the new information, or it was something like, what was it like?
Well, I had to do character development that I had not had to do before. In 2006, it was all Navy and Marine Corps, and everybody was either Navy or Marines. But when I updated it, I had to make some decisions because right now, Space Force is really a subset of the United States Air Force. I disagree with that organization. I think it limits Space Force and what Space Force can do. Uh, I think it lacks vision for what Space Force can do. So I did character development. I had to say, all right, who is truly just Space Force? Who's Air Force gone to Space Force? Who's Navy? Who's Marine? And then I had to do some backstory for me to be able to write the characters. And I don't think it was difficult. I think there were some challenges, but if I want my characters to be real and have experience, I had to do that development. And having worked with the Army and the Air Force before helped me to write those backstories.
Very good. Now, I love that you show that the aliens are deeply flawed, not just pure evil or purely peaceful like we're used to see. Why was that so important to you?
What would an alien really be? I mean, you have the stories of people with encounters of aliens, but in general, we don't encounter extraterrestrial intelligence. So, what would that really look like? What would that be? And how much are they like us as humans? I mean, you don't meet a human without flaws, and you don't meet a human without their own agenda or their own greed or their own desires or, the love of humanity or anything like that. So aliens to me would have very similar desires, functions for us to be able to interact with. A truly, totally alien life force, I don't think anyone has actually really come up with one that is so drastically different that you want to see some of those flaws. And I couldn't just paint a pure black or white, you know, good guy, bad guy type scenario because, as you mentioned, the book is about some leadership and there's some human flaws that come into that interaction. And there's a couple of moral dilemmas for them that they have to assess, think through. Yeah, I indicate they think through it, but it's more of assessing what would you do if you were that person at that moment and you encountered that situation. I give you one outcome, but there are different outcomes.
Right. And you also touch on the themes of diplomacy versus war, which it is such a huge theme today too as well. What do you think we're missing right now as we handle conflicts here on Earth?
I think we forget, and this is where my 2 times going to the Naval War College, one is command staff and then the senior class Naval War College. We forget that diplomacy and war go hand in hand, that
Yes.
political leaders have to balance war or violence with talking diplomacy. And a lot of times we think diplomacy is just kind words. Diplomacy isn't just kind words. And some of the things we were taught in war college is war is politics with violence. So it's still political, and you can't divorce yourself of violence when you're talking about diplomacy. But when do you use it? Where's the balance? And like right now in the United States, while we are using violence in aspects of the world, now we're talking economic warfare, which when I was growing up in school, we were told the soldier of today will no longer exist. It will all be economic warfare. And that didn't ring true then and doesn't ring true now because until we get a unified world where military is off world doing operations, you're still going to have those conflicts. In SESG Explorer, I don't really deal with that. It's more in the book Minerva, the follow-on book, which is close getting out the door. You'll see more of that play within the tensions of the humans while they're trying to deal with what's going on out in space.
Gotcha. So the SSG, the this book, when did you publish? When was
Uh,
it published?
this one was, I'm going to make sure I get it right. Yeah, March of 2023.
Okay.
And it took me a year. I retired in 21. Took me a year to revamp it, and then a year or year plus to actually get it published. And Minerva's running along the same track line.
So that was your first book, and now you are working on, how do you call the second one?
Minerva.
And what is it about? Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, it's actually a continuation of Explorer. SESG Explorer is linear. You know, you have this small fleet of ships going out to meet the aliens, and they encounter different aliens on the way to meet the Comorgans, and they're wanting to have diplomat ties. But things don't go quite right in Explorer. In Minerva, the humans are wrestling with, do we be isolationists or do we expand out into the galaxy? And while the political leaders are debating that, the military has the charter establish a foothold in space. And meanwhile, there's a diplomatic mission going out to find other aliens to have, uh, a coalition, which is an alliance. It just says for this objective, we will all work together to achieve that. And that's the goal of the diplomat on his ship, is to find aliens and develop a coalition. And meanwhile, Admiral Brannigan, the main character in SESG Explorer, is given the task of uh, establishing two colonies and protecting them, and grabbing a space station and protecting it, as well as eliminate some known threats. So it's a parallel book versus a linear book where you have just one mission with one crew. Minerva, you have several missions going on. And then the last book of the trilogy, I kind of bring it back together, and we see more about the Comorgans in the third book. Um, it's kind of like they walked in and said, tell our side of the story.
Right.
So,
That seems interesting. Now, you also talked about inspiring young people, especially with the Space Force growing. What would you tell a teenager today who's dreaming about space exploration or leadership?
many different avenues. There are great opportunities, and don't be afraid. Go for the thing that you find yourself attracted to. If it's military in space, there's a lot of opportunities for that through engineering, education. My personal education is business, which led me for leadership and operational oversight. Uh, there's the more technical side. But with that, if your love is in science and technology or engineering, follow that. And you can still join Space Force or join a civilian Space Force and work hand in glove with the military. And I think we're not preparing ourselves diplomatically for space. What does that mean? So, how would the United States State Department embrace the concept of the space? And there probably are people in the State Department that are thinking about it, but my impression is our last time we thought about space was during the Cold War. And our space diplomacy was more about denying us the ability to use low Earth orbit or high Earth orbit. And it has hampered us on exploration. You know, we only have some probes sent out now, and we have telescopes, but we never developed the mechanisms to get to Mars or settle on the moon or send people into deep space, so to speak, still within our solar system. And we need space diplomacy to get us there, so we don't end up going to war over space, which we may do. So,
Talking about space a little bit, what do you think? And I don't know if honestly, I don't know much about it. I just heard the noise about this last Blue Origin trip. There were some ladies that went up there. Do you know anything about that? Where do they go? Where was it? The moon? And the Mars? Where do they
They
go?
they so there's a couple of different things. They took a shot straight up and came right back down, which Alan Shepard and the cosmonaut Yuri, I'm blanking on his last name, back in the 50s and 60s, we really started a space race. In the 60s, the Soviets sent a man up doing the same thing. And then we sent Alan Shepard. But there, that was truly life threatening. We had never done that before. That was new technology, new engineering. Uh, Here you had five, six ladies as a first all crew. They did the same shot and came back down. But the difference between what was happening in the 60s versus now is that was testing science and testing engineering and testing technology. Today's stuff, that wasn't testing technology. That was using well-developed technology, science, and art. And so it was more of a
Like a
trip.
PR thing?
It's PR, but it's also people who want to get that high up and not spend any time in space. You get to feel some weightlessness. You get to see the planet from a totally different perspective.
Where
So
do
it's
they land it? Did they land anywhere? Did they?
they came right back to Earth, wherever the landing site was. I don't know where that was. Uh,
Okay, so but in space, they didn't go anywhere.
They were probably what's categorized a low Earth orbit, and they didn't do an orbit. They just went up and down.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
It's the SpaceX traveling to the International Space Station that you're actually getting into more of the technology, advanced technology and sciences of even low Earth travel. Yes, there they have to actually calculate an orbit, calculate a rendezvous with the space station, dock, transfer, and then separate and come back. And you heard about maybe Boeing and the two
Hmm.
astronauts that, as air quotes, stranded. They were at the ISS, but not truly stranded. They were just there longer, several months longer than planned. That was a test flight for Boeing and their aircraft or spacecraft. And there's really no failures in this type of world, but the Boeing craft couldn't bring back the two astronauts. They
Right.
brought it back itself, automated, and there's a lot of data off of that. So, stuff to be learned. So that's not a failure. But then SpaceX, Elon Musk guys went up there, did a transfer, and brought back the two astronauts.
Right.
So it wasn't per se a rescue. It was using a different company and different platform to do
Right.
the mission.
Okay. Now, the other question I had is for the SESG Explorer. So, what planet do they go to? What planet do
Well,
they
they
visit?
eventually end up at Komoriga, which is the only, there's two fictional technologies. One is a crystal power source that they discover upon the planet, and the other is hyperspace drive and traveling through hyperspace, which is still in theory. A lot of astrophysicists are trying to figure out what that really would be. So that's the fictional on traveling across a vast difference or distance. And they end up at the Comorigan's homeworld called Comoriga, and they spend a week there to try and develop a trade negotiations, trade relationship. And the Comorigans seem like they're playing along with it. Meanwhile, they do a form of cultural exchange. The Comorgans take a small group of people to different laboratories or schooling, and try and say, look, aren't we such a great people? uh, yeah, that turns out to be a fun ride. And it's not really military oriented by the humans, while they have uh, and I use the term that we did in the Seventh Fleet at the Fleet and Anti-Terrorism and Security Team, FAST. which is a small group of Marines that would go in and do in extremis hostage rescues. So the Commandant of the Marine Corps decided that not only would they do that mission, they would be a personal security detachment for the Admiral, which he didn't like. He didn't like the Commandant intruding upon his command, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Marines do that. That is a realism that I've seen the Marines do, even on the Navy guys. Uh, I've seen where Marines ignored a Navy 4-star commander and had to be ordered by the head Marine. This is in what used to be called Pacific Command. And it was during the Marine Security Detachment went and got the Marine 4-star who said, go get the Admiral and protect him. And the Marines were like, he's Navy. And the 4-star Marine generals, he's the boss. Go get the boss. So, in essence, that story is related to SESG Explorer in that the Commandant wants the Admiral protected at all times. So, when they visit Gamorga, the Marines are there to protect the Admiral and his diplomatic and science team. There was a standing order that the Admiral had to take them. Otherwise, he probably would not have taken them to the planet with them.
Now, one of the things I read on the reviews that you got is that people's old readers keep praising how the book is not weighed down with like heavy tech speak. Was it challenging to strike that balance between being technical enough for realism, or was it something that you could, yeah, accessible enough for new readers?
I think accessible enough for new readers. Yeah, I did have a review complain that I didn't describe the hyperspace drive. And I'm like, all right, you want a technical manual? In which case, I have to go get me an engineer and read all these tech manuals and write a tech manual. And that would bore the daylights out of your general reader. It would bore me even writing it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the technology? Well, the technology level is what we know today. Railguns, hypersonic missiles, regular nukes, taking M16 rifle, a saw, anything like that that the Marines and the Army Rangers would carry into combat. That's the technology. And the only other technology we have are like the lasers. The ships are outfitted with laser cannons. I didn't go Star Wars with blasters, and I didn't go Star Trek with phasers. This is a near future time. So I drew off of the 90s science fiction. And what was the technology like there? You had a hyperspace, you had rockets, but you only had laser technology. And I'm like, well, that's what we have today. Do I describe how a laser works? No. In the last book, I do describe how during a test flight, his SESG Explorer, I mentioned that the Admiral has lost one of his two children, his daughter. Well, in the last book, he tells his son he discovered how she died because it was a secret kept even from the Admiral. And she died during a test flight, and it dealt with the lasers on the fighter ships that are in SCSG Explorer. So that's as deep as I really go into a lot of the tech because it's more about the interaction between the people and the alien and how do you interact and how are they working through their problem sets.
Right.
And, I didn't want a magic button. Some of these stories I've read in the past, the writer has gotten their heroes into such a complex situation. It's like, how do you get out? Oh, suddenly here comes this thing and it's solved. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not the way real life works.
And then everybody knows that the hero is gonna, end up being alive anyways. So,
Right.
like, for the most part.
I've let it be known through various avenues the main character lives. Yes, he's in the other books, but you don't know who lives or dies in the novels. As I like to relate, there's a gunnery sergeant, Marine Corps, I'm writing and he just appeared. I didn't plan for him. He has no character development. And before I know it, he's dead. And it's all in combat. He dies in combat, but I didn't plan for him to exist, nor did I plan for him to die. It just happened. And that's kind of the stream of consciousness writing that comes out. But that gunny is also drawn off Robert A. Heinlein, as well as some real Marines that I've served with. And the way that brotherhood of the Marine Corps with Marines, it's not always shared outside of the Marine Corps with other people. It gets that way. And gunnies get very protective over the Marines that they are over, that they're in charge of. And you see that. And you see that with the Navy chiefs, especially the Navy chiefs that are both Fleet Marine Force or Seabees. And I've seen that even on board the surface crafts, how chiefs get protective of their sailors. So I wanted to bring that out a little bit when he appeared.
Very good. And I, I'm very curious. Do you believe in aliens? Do you believe alien exists?
So I've gone back and forth with this. And as a Christian, I do believe in extraterrestrial intelligence. In the Bible, we have angels and demons and spiritual beasts. And I'm a older Christian, which some will call me a heretic for that, because I do look at how science has measured the timeline of the universe, and nothing in my belief structure says that's false. I can see where we are billions of years old as a universe. That actually makes sense. And with man being the last created being, who says God didn't create extraterrestrial life or intelligent life on other planets? And there was the Drake formula, the pre-modified Drake formula, estimated there could be 30 to 33 intelligent life species in our galaxy. Okay, here's the formula. It's based off of very reasonable assumptions, and they come out with it. So, yeah, I think it's a real possibility. And I would like someday the opportunity to interact with extraterrestrial life and not just angels or demons, just is there another created being out there on the planet that one day will cross paths? And some people will tell you we already have, and we have been visited, which means they have solved interdimensional travel or faster than light travel. And yeah, okay, if they have, why aren't they so more out there and broad for us to know? There may be signs that they have visited the planet. Like, I forget what they're called, but they're in Peru, the large drawings that you can only see from the air.
Right. And then those all these mysteries out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we built the pyramids. I don't think alien life built the pyramids of the Giza Plateau, but the engineering into that and how it was actually done. Are we talking labor of giants? Did we have the technology? Did we reverse engineer, or did somebody teach us and then we went and constructed them? You know, so
Yeah.
there's way too many unanswered questions to just say, nope, that is not the way it happened. I think the door of possibilities is wider than what some of us would like to think.
Absolutely. Well, I was also going to ask you what's next for you. You kind of give us a hint that you are working on that next. It's that the sequel, perhaps, of your book.
Right. So I owe the publisher a approval of a document. We're actually went through, we're about 2 steps away from publishing Minerva. Meanwhile, I've started writing the last book and I have some design work on it to do. And meanwhile, I've been requested to write a romance novel, a sci-fi romance novel. And I've done 4 draft chapters of that book. I started writing the 5th draft chapter, and my wife has actually promised that I will write the book and publish it. So those are 2 books that are in the works. There's a collection of short stories I've been working on, and then there's 2 or 3 other books that are in the pipeline in the mind. And meanwhile, I'm trying to find different events where I can go and be able to sign my book as I sell them to fans and so forth. And I'm really
Okay.
trying to get out this second book in order to have that available. And I'm trying to find a good graphic designer to actually um, draw what the Comorican looks like, because they're totally different from humans. They have 2 arms, but they also have 2 tentacles and they have 3 legs. I'm trying to get somebody to be able to draw that out so I can actually manufacture a Comorican, not a real Comorican, just like a little figurine of a Comorican.
That'll be an interesting being.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Is there a one lasting message that you hope our audience carries with them today to from today's conversation?
Well, one, buy the SESG Explorer and my website, ChristopherLoric.com. You can go to one of your 4 favorites. But the book is an adventure. It's a story, but it's a story based off of real people that I've worked with throughout my 28 years of military service. And maybe you can, by reading it, be inspired to either go down a science technology path, a diplomacy path, or a military path to really lead us into the future. As the future's coming, we either face it with ethics and leadership, or we just roll with the punches, and that may not be a good thing. It's better to
Absolutely.
prepare for the future than let it happen to you.
Yes. Christopher, thank you so much for bringing such a bold and thoughtful vision of the world. I find your story quite powerful. Reminder that leadership, courage, and also having a heart, to really move humanity forward, not just technology, right?
Right?
And
Exactly.
so, yep. And so I recommend every one of our listeners to be sure to grab your copy of the SESG Explorer. I believe, where is it available? Can you tell us?
Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart. Definitely, if you go to ChristopherLoric.com, you'll see those hot buttons. Amazon offers, and so does Barnes and Noble, ebook as well as paperback and hard copy.
Do you have an audiobook?
I tried that, but I went on the cheap and I immediately crushed it when I heard it. It was so bad. They used, and I really don't like the term AI being used like it is,
Mm-hmm.
but they used a form of AI and they ruined the whole thing. I even tried to correct it. I spent hours trying to, and at the end, I'm like, kill it. No, pull
So
it.
you were trying to read it yourself?
No, they used a computer
Mm-hmm.
record,
Yes.
and the computer did not, like EVA, they called it
Mm-hmm.
EVA.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
But maybe eventually you can read it yourself.
I tried that, but I don't have a good recording voice for it. I rather find a good recorder and
Right. Or find someone.
yeah, there's actually professional actors that do
Yes.
real audio books, but right now that's 15,000 dollars to get that done, and I rather concentrate the money on different speaking engagements or events to go to and actually interact with people.
Right. So eventually, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm working on my audiobook right now because every song is okay. So I have my book out, and people are like, "I don't read. Do you have audiobook?" So apparently now there is a generation of people that don't read, but they will listen. Apparently on their way to work. I'm like, okay,
And I would like to get there, but if you do, like I've read in a trilogy, so all 3 books definitely would have to be audios as well.
yes.
So maybe we can get there,
Yeah, it is
looking at
possible.
it is, and there's a couple of options that I want to explore. Pun on word, not intended, to explore a method of getting an audiobook done. Uh,
Yes. And before we go, I've been wanting to ask you, where did the love from for writing came? I know you were in the. I mean, is that something that did you ever grow up saying one day I'm going to be a writer or?
Yeah, it was sparked early. I mean, I grew up reading sci-fi novels from the 1950s. Finally went to Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and J.R. Tolkien, Stephen R. Donaldson finally. But I actually found when my first semester in college, we had to write a short story, and I found that very enjoyable, telling the story, how it unfolded. And actually, I started trying to write in high school and uh, had some very good pointers. So, but I started writing a novel in college and doing a lot of research into the technology I was going to use. I still have the draft in my files, and I'll probably get to that book eventually. But
That's good.
that was large scale ground movements of troops, I and I've actually drawn out one of the battles that will take place in that novel. But I'm trying to figure out how to introduce the different characters in that novel. Uh, but yeah, that's an old one from my college days. But SESG Explorer, the Minerva, and these a couple other books, they came along and just said, nope, our story's going to be told first. Put that one back on the shelf. This story we want told.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for, I really had a lot of fun listening to what all that you bring in. Follow up Christopher online, grab the copy of the SESG Explorer. Stay tuned to the Life Unscripted podcast for more provoking stories from rising voices in science fiction. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed at True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to change your dreams, to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed at True American Dream by Rosabel Zohfeld on Amazon or head to the link in the show notes because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.